It wasn't what I thought. It couldn't be. But in that moment, something deep inside me whispered that I couldn't leave it in the wrong hands. I'm Harold Whitaker, 73 years old, and I can still feel that afternoon burning under the Texas sun. I stared at the plastic bag filled with white powder, trembling fingers catching the light. The chemical smell rose like a warning, a mistake ready to explode. Then footsteps echoed upstairs. No time to think. I walked to the aquarium, lifted the glass lid, and hid the bag beneath the stones. The goldfish swam slowly, their scales flashing blue under the light, as if they were guarding the secret I was never meant to uncover. Would you have done the same? Tell me where you're listening from. And tell me, how far would you go to protect the ones you love? That day, I thought I was saving my son. I had no idea I was about to uncover something that would change everything we believed about our family. The morning after that discovery, the Texas heat was already shimmering through the kitchen windows. The radio played low, one of those old country songs my late wife Martha loved, and the smell of brewed coffee mixed with the faint salt of the desert wind. Life in Abilene moved at the pace of a porch swing, slow, predictable, and heavy with memories. I've lived alone in this house for 12 years now. Martha's roses still bloom out back, stubborn bright red, refusing to surrender to the dry soil. Sometimes I think they're the reason I keep getting up in the morning. I prune them every week, same as she did, careful not to touch the thorns. That's how she taught me to handle life. Steady hands, sharp eyes, never rush. My son, Ethan, was supposed to be the proof that all our sacrifices were worth it. He grew up watching me polish my navy boots and hearing me say the same words over and over. Integrity doesn't age. Now he wears suits instead of uniforms and talks about solar energy instead of survival. He works for Sunvale Innovations in Dallas, an engineer with more ambition than sense sometimes. And Laura, his wife, she's been a quiet blessing since the day she joined this family. She calls me Dad, keeps the house warm when they visit, and never lets a plate stay empty on my table. But lately, things have felt off. Ethan's calls have grown shorter, his eyes restless. And Laura, well, she's been wearing that tired smile that women use when they're trying to hide something cracking underneath. That morning, she stood by the stove, stirring eggs she'd forgotten to season. Ethan's flight leaves tomorrow, she said softly, not looking at me. Phoenix again, I answered, pretending not to hear the tremor in her voice. He said the Sunvale deal could change everything. Big money, big titles. She nodded, forcing a smile. Big distance, too. When Ethan came downstairs, he was already dressed in the blue shirt that makes him look like his mother's photograph. He greeted me with a distracted, "Morning, Dad," before checking his phone. The name, Madison K., flashed on the screen for a second. Then he turned the phone face down. Laura's hand froze on the coffee pot. He noticed. "Work," he said quickly. "Just work." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. There are moments when silence tells a man more than any confession. Later that day, Ethan left for the office, and Laura tried to keep busy, folding clothes that didn't need folding, cleaning counters that were already clean. I offered to help pack Ethan's suitcase. She hesitated, then nodded. That's when I saw the tremor in her hands. Something inside me felt the old instinct again, the one that used to keep me alive out at sea. It's that quiet signal between danger and duty, when you realize you're standing on the edge of something about to break. When she went upstairs to fetch more shirts, I saw the travel case unzipped. Inside, beneath a layer of folded clothes, was the small bag with white powder and an envelope sealed tight. I didn't think. I just acted. That's the thing about age. You stop waiting for explanations when your gut already knows the answer. Minutes later, the bag was buried under the pebbles of the aquarium, glinting faintly like a bad memory. Now, sitting alone at the table, I kept staring at that aquarium. The fish moved lazily through the blue light, their reflections sliding across the walls like ghosts. It looked peaceful, but I knew better. Peace is often just the pause before the noise. By evening, Ethan returned home full of energy, bragging about numbers and projections. "Once this deal goes through, Dad, Sunvale's gonna make history," he said. Laura smiled faintly, pushing food around her plate. I watched the two of them across the table, their shoulders barely aligned, their eyes never meeting. The distance between them was a language I understood. After dinner, when Ethan went outside to take another call, Laura leaned close and whispered, "Something's wrong. I can feel it." Her eyes glistened in the kitchen light. "Whatever happens," I told her, "you tell me first." She nodded, but I could see fear already building behind that polite expression. When the night settled, I walked out to the porch. The desert sky stretched wide and starless, heavy with heat. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote cried, a single lonely sound that felt too human. I thought about the bag under the water, about the secret I had trapped inside glass. I'd spent a lifetime fighting storms out on the ocean, but this one was coming from inside my own house. Back inside, the clock struck 10. The light from the aquarium flickered against the wall like Morse code, like the sea signals I used to read by instinct. "Something's coming," it seemed to say. I stood there for a long time, watching the goldfish move through their small world, and wondered if I'd done the right thing. Maybe I'd just started a storm I couldn't control. The next morning arrived, heavy and bright. One of those Texas days where the light doesn't just fall, it presses down. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen again, but the air was different. Laura moved slower than usual, lost in thought, while I sat by the window pretending to read the newspaper. Truth was, I hadn't read a full paragraph since yesterday. My eyes kept drifting to the aquarium, to that soft glow behind the glass, where something dangerous now slept beneath the pebbles. At 73, I've learned that life often hides its biggest storms inside quiet mornings. Ethan came down the stairs in a rush, adjusting his tie and checking his watch. "Dad, can you believe it? Phoenix in less than 24 hours. He said, grinning like a man standing at the edge of the world he thinks he owns. Laura handed him his thermos of coffee and a brown paper lunch bag. "Eat something on the road," she murmured. He barely looked at her. "You don't have to pack so much guilt with your sandwiches," I said quietly, and Ethan frowned. "Dad, not today, please. I've got too much riding on this." "You always do," I answered. He hesitated but didn't ask what I meant. Maybe he already knew. When the door shut behind him, Laura and I were left in silence. She stood by the sink, watching his truck pull away through the dusty window. Then, as if her legs lost strength, she sat down opposite me. "Do you ever get that feeling," she said softly, "that something bad has already happened and you're just waiting for the news to reach you?" I looked at her, at the pale skin under her eyes, the tremor in her fingers. "Yes," I said. "It's the same feeling you get when you've sailed into a fog and realize the map isn't worth a damn anymore." That made her smile briefly. "You still talk like a sailor." Old habits. They helped me stay afloat. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled by, leaving a trail of dust that caught the morning light. I thought about that bag again, the envelope, the powder, the stench of chemicals, and the question that had haunted me all night. Had Laura planted it? Her shock had seemed real yesterday, but fear makes good actors of us all. Before I could ask, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, then looked away too quickly. "Who is it?" I asked. "No one. Just a friend from church." But I saw the name before she flipped it over. Unknown number. Her pulse jumped. She wasn't lying exactly, but she wasn't telling the truth either. I folded the newspaper and set it aside. "Laura," I said, "if you're in trouble, I need to know." She shook her head, eyes wet but defiant. "It's not me you should worry about." Before I could press her further, Ethan's truck returned sooner than expected. He came through the door, still holding his phone, face pale. Flight got moved up, he said. I have to leave tonight. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Phoenix wants me early for dinner with the board. Madison going too? I asked. He looked up sharply. Why would you say that? Because you didn't deny it, I said. His lips parted, but no sound came. Laura stared at him, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. He looked from her to me, then down at the floor. You two talk too much, he muttered, and walked out to the porch. The door closed, and Laura exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. He wasn't always like this, she said, voice breaking. When we got married, he used to leave notes in my purse saying, "You're my calm in the storm." Now, he just is the storm. I didn't know how to comfort her. Men like Ethan, good men once, don't notice the moment greed starts sounding like ambition. It's a quiet shift, like rust under paint. You don't see it until the whole thing crumbles. That night, I sat alone in the living room, with only the hum of the aquarium for company. The blue light rippled over the ceiling, reminding me of the ocean. Funny how water can hold both peace and danger at the same time. I thought of Martha, how she'd have handled all this with patience I never learned to copy. She used to say, "You can't stop the waves, Harold, but you can stand where they break." Maybe that's what I was doing now, standing where something big was about to crash. At 10, headlights flared through the curtains. Ethan's truck again. He stumbled inside, his tie loosened, eyes glassy. "Madison and I nailed the presentation, Dad. We're leaving together in the morning. Private flight." I stood up slowly. "Private? Since when does the company pay for that?" He grinned. "When you're valuable." Laura appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching the banister. "Or when you're being used." Ethan spun toward her. "Don't start, Laura. You wouldn't understand. Try me," she whispered. "I'm doing this for us." "Are you?" she asked, voice trembling. "Because I haven't seen us in a long time." I could have stepped in, I should have. But some lessons can't be taught with words. They need the sound of silence to echo around them. Ethan grabbed his coat and slammed the door behind him. Laura collapsed onto the couch, shoulders shaking. "I think he's in over his head," she said through tears. "And I think Madison's pulling him under." I wanted to tell her about the bag in the aquarium, about the thing that could destroy all of us. But something stopped me, a voice that said, "Not yet." Because sometimes, to find the truth, you have to let the lie finish its run. So I sat there beside her, both of us listening to the soft hum of the filter, the slow swirl of fish beneath the glass, and the ticking clock that promised everything was about to change. By morning, the house had the hush of a chapel and the restlessness of a storm front. I brewed coffee I didn't want and watched the blue pulse of the aquarium crawl over the kitchen tiles. The bag slept under the pebbles like a tooth nobody wanted to pull. If I stared long enough, I could almost hear it ticking. Laura came down late, her hair in a loose knot, a sweater too big for the heat. "He left before dawn," she said, voice flat. "Said he had to meet Madison at the office." I set her a cup and said nothing. Silence is a language old men learn twice, once in youth, when they don't know what to say, once in age, when they know too much to say it. "Do you think he loves her?" she asked. So quiet I almost missed it. "I think he loves the open door she stands in," I answered. "Men confuse that with love all the time." She nodded, but her eyes were far away, as if she were listening for a train she knew would never arrive. At 10, I pulled the old laptop from the hall closet. The hinge still squeaked, a sound like a small animal trying to escape. I hadn't opened the machine in months. The Navy taught me to keep things ready, even when I swore I was done with them. A man retires, but his habits do not. I started with what I knew. Sunvale, the Phoenix deal, Madison Kerr. The screen filled with bright photographs and dim facts. She had the kind of resume that looks clean because someone wiped it right before you entered the room. Speeches at energy conferences. A panel with her name spelled wrong on a banner that spelled the company right. Then a lead, Douglas Kerr, Solar Edge Partners. rival, father. I wrote the names on a yellow pad, drawing lines between them like a quiet detective who knows no one is coming to help. The phone on the wall rang once, then stopped. Laura looked up from the sink. "Telemarketer," she said, but her hands were shaking. I called an old friend, Petty Officer Marlowe, retired, living 40 minutes north where the land starts to look like a thought someone abandoned. "Harold, you old anchor," he said when he picked up. "You only call when the sea is mean." "The sea's inside the house this time," I said. "I need to know if a name rings bells. Madison Kerr, Solar Edge. Anything red on your side of the ledger?" He whistled. "Can't say on the line. But I can say this, Solar Edge has been sniffing around Sunvale's scaffolding like coyotes at a calf pen. Folks with teeth, you watch your fingers." "Watching," I said, "and counting." After lunch I drove Laura to the church thrift sale because she insisted. People in small towns pretend normal when they can't afford panic. The fellowship hall smelled like coffee, dust and a sugary perfume that made me think of Martha, of the way she'd pat my chest and say, "Breathe in, Harold, there's sweetness somewhere, even when you can't see it." Laura arranged folded shirts like peace offerings, while I drifted between tables of brittle picture frames and ceramic angels. The ladies spoke in the soft, sharp way of people who want news without asking. "Heard Ethan's making waves," one of them said to another, not looking at me. "Phoenix money." The other lady made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Money's just a mirror," she said. "It tells you what you were before you had it." Outside, I stepped into the bright heat and dialed Ethan, straight to voicemail. I tried again and got a text instead. "In meetings, don't wait up." The words sat on the screen like a note you pin to a door right before you run. Back home, the house felt watched. Maybe it was the way the blinds threw narrow shadows over the floor, like prison bars that didn't commit to the metaphor. I checked the front porch out of habit. A padded envelope lay on the mat. No return address. My name in letters that tried too hard to be neat. I carried it inside and opened it with the old pocket knife Martha once said made me look more dangerous than I was. Inside, a single flash drive and a sticky note. "For Ethan," it said. "Before Phoenix." The handwriting had that careful slant people use when they want you to hear their whisper in your head. Laura came in from the yard, rubbing her eyes. "What's that?" "Another open door," I said, turning the drive over in my hand, "and behind it a cliff." "I'm done with doors," she said, and there was a tremble there that wasn't from fear alone. "I've been waiting on a husband who keeps choosing hallways." I set the drive on the table and went to the aquarium. The fish moved with the lazy grace of creatures who have never seen a storm. I watched the small shimmer of the bag in the gravel like a tooth in a grin I didn't trust. Out of the corner of my eye, the flash drive sat like a black seed on a white plate. "Play it," Laura said, "or don't, but stop pretending the choice doesn't belong to us." I slid the drive into the laptop. A folder appeared. Sunvale, internal. Inside, 3 files. The first, a recording. I clicked. A woman's voice, cool, too smooth for the warmth of the room. "Deliver the specs before the dinner, Ethan. The board loves short pitches and long silences. Give them both. And remember, it's not betrayal if the future benefits." Madison. Her laugh at the end was a small knife. I could picture my son nodding on the other end, trying to look taller for a voice that wanted him shorter. The second file was a spreadsheet. Columns of numbers that looked harmless until you noticed the names at the top weren't Sunvale's at all. They were Solar Edge's project codes, color-coded like an artist who paints with other people's secrets. The third file was a video, hotel hallway dated a week ago, Madison at a door, Ethan arriving 2 minutes later. They don't touch, not on camera. They don't have to. Some proximities are louder than contact. Laura turned away. Her shoulders lifted once, then held. "I thought I was ready," she said. "I'm not." I paused the video and closed the laptop. "It's data, not destiny," I told her, and the sentence felt like I was speaking to my son through a wall. Near dusk, headlights raked the living room again. Ethan, home early. He came in wearing the kind of smile men wear when they're about to lie to someone who loves them. "Big day tomorrow," he said, kissing Laura's forehead without looking at her. "Dad, can you help me grab the hard case from the truck?" Outside, the heat had softened, turned the air into warm bread. I lifted the truck's bed cover and found the case. Black, heavy, locked. Ethan fished a key from his pocket. "Prototypes," he said. "Nothing sensitive, just high value." "Like trust," I said. He didn't laugh. "You always did like your sermons." "And you always did like your shortcuts," I answered, because once a father stops being honest, he becomes a stranger with familiar hands. Inside, I set the case by the stairs. Laura was in the kitchen, her face rinsed, the brave kind of clean. She handed Ethan a plate. He said he wasn't hungry. She said that wasn't the question she asked. The room held its breath. I took the flash drive from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. "Someone sent this," I said. "Said you should see it before Phoenix." He stared at it like it might open its mouth. "Who sent it?" "Unknown," I said. "But the voice on it isn't." His jaw worked. He reached for the drive, then stopped. "This is an ambush," he said. "No," I told him. "Ambush is allowed. This is mercy. Mercy is quiet and early." He slid the drive into the laptop. The recording played. His posture changed in slow frames. Pride to doubt to anger to fear. When the hotel hallway appeared, he slammed the lid shut. "You think this proves something?" He snapped at Laura, as if she'd built the files herself. "You think you know what that is?" "I know what distance looks like," she said. "It's in our house." He turned to me. "You've always hated that I wanted more." "I've always hated that you mistook more for better," I said. "There's a difference men only learn by losing." He laughed then, the brittle kind that cuts your gums. "And what have you lost, Dad?" "Your mother," I said, the word landing like a coin on a cold table. "And I won't lose you by silence." For a long moment all we heard was the low hum of the filter and the distinct, damp click of a goldfish mouth at the surface. Tiny hunger, honest and unashamed. He pocketed the flash drive. "I'm going to the office," he said. "I'll sort this out with Madison. I don't need lectures." "Take the hard case with you," I said, and he frowned, not understanding why I wanted him to carry what he'd been hiding. But he did. He left in a thunder of engine and pride. Laura sat down slowly, as if the chair might not hold. "I can't fight a ghost," she whispered. "She's in every room he walks into." "You don't have to fight her," I said, moving to the aquarium, watching the faint glint under the gravel. "You have to decide which rooms you'll keep standing in." Night fell and stretched the house tight. I turned off the lamp, leaving only the aquarium's blue to drape the walls. I dialed Marlowe again. "It's bigger than office gossip," I said. "They're moving specs, probably leverage for Phoenix. I've got a voice recording and a spreadsheet that matches Solar Edge codes." "That's a bite," he said. "You want me to tug the line?" "Not yet," I said, watching the fish carve small moons through their water. "If I pull now, I drag my son under with what's hooked to him. I need a way to split the line, save the fish, catch the shark." Marlowe exhaled. "You always did like an elegant knot." "I like the ones that hold," I said. I hung up and stared at the aquarium. The secret under those stones wasn't just a threat anymore. It was an option, and options are the cruelest form of hope. From the driveway, a car I didn't recognize crept by, too slow to be lost. Headlights washed the porch and paused. Then the engine eased away. My skin prickled in that old way it did before a mission. I checked the locks and stood still in the dark until my breathing matched the soft buzz of the filter. Somewhere between the water's glow and the clock's ticking, I realized the shape of the choice ahead. To plant the truth where it would be found or keep drowning in a silence that was already full of ghosts. Men like me don't get many more right moves. We spend them carefully. Upstairs a floorboard sighed, the house letting me know it had heard everything. All right, I whispered to no one and everyone. We do this clean. Down in the dark, the aquarium light blinked, steadied, and held. By dawn, the decision had settled in me like an old coin at the bottom of a well, weighty, cold, and certain. I couldn't stop what Ethan had already set in motion, but I could control where it landed. That's what command was. Not power, but direction when the storm comes calling. Laura was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a quilt she must have pulled from the hall closet. The TV had gone to static hours ago. I turned it off and stood there watching her breathe, small and steady. There was something noble about her exhaustion, like she'd fought a war no one saw and still refused to surrender. I brewed coffee and opened the back door. The morning air tasted of dust and roses, Martha's stubborn garden refusing to quit. The thorns caught the light like little barbed warnings. She used to say, if the world won't protect what's beautiful, it's your duty to guard it. I'd laughed then, now I wasn't sure it was a metaphor. At 8, Marlowe called back. I dug into that spreadsheet, he said. You were right, those codes match a Solar Edge test program. Prototype worth a few million easy. And if your boy's carrying it across state lines, the feds won't care how accidental it looks. Could they prove it's theft? I asked. He chuckled, but without joy. They won't need to. Just proximity. They'll chew 'em alive before they ask for seasoning. My grip tightened on the phone. Then I need to move before Phoenix. Careful, Whitaker, Marlowe warned. You start moving evidence around, it's obstruction. You'll end up the one with the chain around his neck. I looked at the aquarium. Maybe that's the cost. He sighed. You were always the kind of man who'd bleed on a floorboard just to hide the stain. Just, don't forget you're not alone this time. I hung up and watched Laura stir awake. Her hair fell over her face, and for a second she looked like Martha did the morning we said goodbye before my last deployment, brave in ways that hurt to watch. What time is it? She murmured. Too early for lies, I said, handing her a cup. She gave a small, tired smile. I dreamed we were on a ship, she said. You and me and Ethan. But there was water coming in from below, and no one else noticed. That's not a dream, I said softly. That's memory predicting the future. After breakfast, I told her I needed to take a drive. She offered to come, but I shook my head. I need to talk to a man who still owes me a favor. I drove to the outskirts of Abilene, where the old industrial yards gave way to desert. Marlowe was waiting in a diner that smelled of grease and old secrets. He looked smaller than I remembered, bones sharper under skin. You look like hell, sailor, he said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Inside were printouts, Madison's company records, a timeline, photos. She's not just a plant, he said. She's a trigger. Her father's been pushing Solar Edge to buy Sunvale from the inside. The Phoenix trip is a setup, transfer of data, quick exit. Your son's the mule. Does Ethan know? Doubt it. Madison's good. Makes a man think corruption's romance with a better wardrobe. I stared at the pictures. Madison smiling next to executives twice her age. Ethan in the background of one, eyes proud, blind. Can we stop it? Marlowe sipped his coffee. We can try, but you need leverage, something that forces their hand, and I think you already have it. The bag, the envelope, the thing in my aquarium that could sink a company or a family, depending on where it surfaced. When I got home, Laura was waiting on the porch steps, eyes red from worry. You left without saying a word. I needed to see an old ghost, I said. She crossed her arms. Did he tell you how to fix this? No, but he reminded me what broken looks like. Inside, the air was heavy. Ethan's briefcase sat on the counter, the same one from the truck. I ran my hand over the leather, locked. I could hear the faint clink of metal inside. Laura stood in the doorway. You shouldn't, she said, but there wasn't conviction in her voice. Maybe, I said. But I've lived long enough to know the truth doesn't wait for permission. I took the pocket knife and flipped the latch. Inside were company files, a laptop, and a second sealed envelope. This one stamped with the Sunvale crest. The seal had been broken and glued again. Inside, blueprints and a smaller note with Madison's handwriting. "Deliver this directly. No copies." My stomach turned. It was confirmation enough. Laura stared at the note, whispering, "She used him." "People only use what's already for sale," I said, harsher than I meant. She flinched. "You think he wanted this?" "I think he wanted to matter," I said. "That's the most dangerous hunger of all." We sat in silence for a long while, the aquarium humming like a distant engine. Then she said, "So what now?" I looked at the glow of the tank, at the quiet shimmer of the hidden bag. "Now I plant the truth where the liars can't dig it out." She frowned. "You mean, if Madison wants evidence, I'll give her some. Just not the kind she expects." That night I typed a message to an old Sunvale contact I still had from my Navy tech days, a compliance officer named Reed. I told him I'd found irregularities linked to Solar Edge, and that he'd find proof soon enough. Then I printed the documents from Marlowe's file, sealed them with the same kind of tape Madison used, and wrote her name on the front. When Laura saw me packing it all into an old messenger bag, she whispered, "Harold, what are you doing?" "Baiting a hook," I said, "and hoping the fish bites before my son drowns." She caught my wrist. "You can't fight them alone." I met her eyes. "I'm not. You're watching the tank. If I don't come back by morning, you feed the fish and call Reed. Tell him everything, Harold." I squeezed her hand. "That's an order, sailor." She laughed once through tears, the sound small and brave. "Hey, Captain." The night wind carried heat and dust through the open door as I stepped out. Behind me, the aquarium light flickered once, like a signal, the kind sailors send when they're about to disappear into fog. The night in Abilene felt like a held breath. I parked 2 blocks from Sunvale and walked the rest of the way with the messenger bag biting my shoulder. Downtown was mostly empty, but for the neon from a bar and the stutter of a crosswalk light. The Sunvale building rose clean and mirrored, the kind of glass that pretends it can't see the grime that built it. Reed had agreed to meet me by the freight entrance. Late, quiet, deniable. I waited under a buzzing light with moths throwing themselves at the heat like it could forgive them. Footsteps, a woman's silhouette before a man's. I didn't need the light to know who she was. "Mr. Whitaker," Madison said, voice soft enough to bruise. "Out for a stroll." "Looking for Reed," I answered, not taking the bait. "Looking in the wrong place," she said. "Compliance offices are upstairs. This is where the real work happens." Reed appeared behind her, eyes restless. He had the hunted look of a man who'd once been brave, but learned how much that cost. "Harold," he said low, "you shouldn't be here." "I brought you proof," I told him, lifting the bag. "Solar Edge codes, recordings. If Phoenix proceeds, you're not landing a deal, you're buying a charge." Madison smiled at Reed. "This is the man I told you about," she said. "The one who's been harassing staff. He showed up at the office earlier this week demanding files." She looked back at me. "You didn't think we wouldn't prepare, did you?" "Harassing," I repeated. "Is that what you call turning on a light in a dark room?" "I call it trespassing." She nodded toward the corner camera. The red dot blinked like a cold eye. Reed swallowed. "If you have something, Harold, leave it with me. Then go home." "Home." The word did a slow, hard thing inside my chest. "You'll bury it," I said. His silence was an answer. "Hand it over, Mr. Whitaker," Madison said, palm out. "Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." I took a step forward, then another, close enough to smell a perfume that gave me a headache. "You're using my son." "I'm using gravity," she said, almost kindly. "It's not my fault he fell." I slid the bag strap from my shoulder and held it like a choice between 2 fires. Then I set it on the concrete at my feet. "You want it?" I said. "Come bend your back like the rest of us." For a beat, no one moved. Reed shifted, uncertain. Madison's smile thinned. "Security," she called, not raising her voice, not needing to. 2 guards stepped from the shadows like punctuation. Escort Mr. Whitaker off company property, she said. If he returns, call the police. I stared at Reed. The truth's in there. When it burns you, remember who threw the match. He didn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, he said, and for a second I believed he meant it. They walked me out through the service gate. The guards were polite, the way men are when they put on the uniform that lets them forget they're young. At the curb, one of them said, "Sir, you can collect your bag at the front desk in the morning." Madison had kept the messenger bag. She had kept my leverage. I walked the long way back to the truck to wash the anger off. It didn't work. By the time I turned onto my street, the moon was a hard coin in the sky, and the roses out front were faint shadows in the yard. Headlights flared in my driveway. Ethan's truck, idling. He was on the porch with his phone to his ear. When he saw me, he stood. "What did you do?" he asked before I could say anything. His voice was wired with panic. "Madison called. She said you came to the office, tried to hand over forged documents. She said you're sabotaging the deal." "Forged?" I laughed, a dry, ugly sound. "They're her numbers, Ethan." "That's not what Reed says," he shot back. "He says you tried to bribe him." "She got to him," I said. He took a step closer. "You can't keep doing this, treating me like a boy you can steer. I'm a director now. I have a team. My choices are the reason I found a bag of powder in your suitcase," I said. He froze, pupils pinpricks. For a heartbeat, the porch light hummed loud enough to be a storm. "What did you say?" he asked, too calm. "I moved it," I said, because I couldn't keep lying to a man I was trying to save. "It's somewhere safe." His voice came out like ground glass. "You planted drugs to frame me?" "I pulled poison out of your pocket," I said, "so Madison couldn't shove you off a cliff while calling it a step." He shook his head, breath short. "You're sick," he whispered. "You need help." The door opened behind him. Laura stood there, the porch light carving tired lines on her face. "What's going on?" "Your father-in-law's been playing cop," Ethan said, "and now the company thinks he's unwell enough to be dangerous." "He's trying to protect you," she said. "From success?" Ethan asked, incredulous. "From the first chance in my life to be more than a man repainting his father's rules." The old rage flared in me. The one that made me a good petty officer and a bad husband when I was young. "I am not your anchor," I said. "I am the ship that brought you to shore. And now you're dragging me back out," he said, voice breaking. "I can't breathe with you deciding what truth is." "Then look at it," I snapped, stabbing a finger toward his chest. "Look at the tape. Listen to the call. She's not your future. She's an exit disguised as a bridge." He laughed, and the sound echoed down the street. Somewhere, a dog barked once and decided not to bother again. "You think you're the only one who can hear subtext? I know when a woman wants something. I chose to believe that thing was me." Laura flinched. He saw it. "I didn't mean—" he started. But the apology died like a small bird in his mouth. She spoke not to him, but to me. "This house is not a battlefield." "Then pick a flag," Ethan said, and there was the boy in him again, scared and proud. "Because I'm not staying to be lectured in my own home." "It's my home," I said, too low. He seemed to remember that, and the remembering hurt him. He grabbed his keys. "I'll be at a hotel," he said. "In the morning I'm flying to Phoenix, with or without your blessing." "Don't go," Laura said. "Not like this." He kissed the top of her head without looking at her. "You coming with me?" She tried to answer, but a tremor stole the sound. He took her silence for what it was and walked past me off the porch, down the steps, to the truck. At the curb, he stopped, turned. "You always told me integrity doesn't age," he said. "You forgot to mention arrogance doesn't either." The truck peeled away, tail lights shrinking to twin red judgments. The quiet after was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The cicadas seemed to pause. A neighbor's window blinked dark. Laura remained in the doorway, holding the jam like it might float. "Side," I said gently. "Please." We sat at the kitchen table because people in pain reach for the familiar even when it cuts. The aquarium cast blue light over everything. It looked like we were underwater, speaking in bubbles that might never reach the surface. "I can't stay here tonight," Laura said after a while. "I can't watch him leave again in the morning. It'll break something I can't take back." "Where will you go?" "My sister's," she said. "Lubbock, just for a few days. I wanted to tell her she should stay, that I needed someone to witness me not losing my mind. But she'd spent a year witnessing things I had only just noticed." "Oh," I said, "take my car. He'll be watching yours." "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked. "Yes," I lied. She stood, touched my shoulder. "You're a good man," she whispered. "But good men can do harm when they're sure they're the only ones who see the storm." When the door shut behind her, the house sagged, as if a load-bearing beam had gone traveling. I walked to the roses and stood there in the dark, breathing the iron hint of the earth. In the moonlight, the thorns were small, shining teeth. On the way back in, I saw it, a yellow slip fluttering on the front door, taped crooked. Notice of complaint. It read in stiff letters. There'd been an anonymous tip to the Abilene police about controlled substances at my address. A courtesy warning, it said. A welfare check would be performed within 24 hours. The aquarium hummed behind me like an engine. My throat went dry. I pictured the bag under the gravel, the envelope wrapped and waiting, the way the blue light turned everything pure while it hid the worst thing in the room. I went to the tank, lifted the lid. The warmth of the light on my wrist felt like a hand that didn't care if it burned me. I slid 2 fingers into the cool water and touched the pebbles until I felt the plastic edge. I could have pulled it then and ended the tension of not knowing. I could have flushed it, ground it into paste, buried it in the yard where only worms keep secrets. Instead, I lifted my hand out and let the water drip onto the glass like small, patient seconds. "No," I said, to the fish, to the house, to Martha's memory. "Not yet." I dried my hand on a dish towel, sat, and waited for a dawn I didn't want. Somewhere between midnight and morning, a car rolled past too slowly. It stopped. A soft hiss. When I stepped onto the porch, the roses were wet where the desert hadn't been. The smell wasn't water. It was chemical. By noon, 3 bushes would go brown all at once like a silent verdict. The rupture didn't arrive like a slap. It arrived like that. A slow, stupid murder of beautiful things, the kind no one could be arrested for. By sunrise, my son was gone. My daughter-in-law was on the road. My leverage was in a stranger's hands, and the police were coming to search a house I could no longer protect, without confessing to every sin I'd committed to keep it standing. I brewed coffee and did not drink it. I sat in the blue light and watched the fish move through their small world, unmarred by human definitions of ruin. When the knock came, 3 even taps, I didn't stand right away. I fixed my collar like a man heading into church. Then I opened the door to the officers and said, with a voice I didn't recognize as mine, "Morning." The senior officer, polite and tired, explained the welfare check, the anonymous call, the standard questions. "We won't make a mess," he said, and I believed him. Men like that don't make messes. They just point at them. "Where do you want to start?" I asked. "The living room, sir." I stepped aside. They entered. One of them paused at the aquarium. "Nice fish," he said, like a man admiring a painting at a funeral. "Yes," I said. "They keep me honest." He smiled, not understanding. I watched their reflections in the glass, 2 grey shapes moving through blue water, while I kept my hands folded and my face steady, and told myself the same thing I used to tell terrified sailors with green stomachs and white knuckles. Stand where the waves break. Then stand again. The search lasted less than an hour, but it felt like a war fought in whispers. The officers moved with the efficiency of men who'd rather be anywhere else. They opened drawers, checked under cushions, lifted picture frames as if my memories were weapons waiting to go off. The aquarium light flickered across their faces, blue and calm, a cruel contrast to the storm churning in my chest. They didn't find the bag, of course. It sat buried beneath the pebbles, quiet and loyal. But I could feel its presence the way a man feels an old wound when the weather turns. When they left, I thanked them for their time, as if I'd invited them for coffee instead of humiliation. One of them nodded politely. "You take care of yourself, sir," he said, and that single word, sir, hurt more than any accusation could. It sounded like pity dressed in uniform. The door shut, and I was alone again. The house smelled of turned-up dust and old guilt. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the faint, wet outlines their boots had left on the tile. They looked like footprints, walking away from me, disappearing one by one. Outside, the sky was turning that hard white color Texas saves for its cruelest afternoons. The roses in the yard had already started to wither, their petals curling like burned paper. I walked out, knees aching, and knelt by the dead bushes. The soil smelled sharp, artificial. The chemical sheen on the leaves told me everything I needed to know. Someone had come in the night, someone who wanted to remind me that silence has a price. Madison, or someone working for her, had sent a message, and she'd chosen Martha's roses to deliver it. I cut the dead branches down one by one until the stems stood bare and honest. Then I gathered the withered petals and burned them in an old metal basin, watching the smoke curl upward like a prayer for the things I'd failed to protect. By evening, the loneliness was so thick it felt like another presence in the room. The clock ticked too loud, the air too still. I tried calling Ethan twice, both times straight to voicemail. The second time, his recorded voice hit harder than I expected. "Hey, this is Ethan. Leave a message." He sounded younger there, unbroken, the boy who used to bring me water while I fixed the roof. "Son," I said into the silence, "you're walking into a storm you can't read. Don't trust calm seas. They hide the worst currents." I hung up before the machine beeped again. I wasn't sure if I was warning him or myself. Night came early, pressing against the windows. The house had the stillness of a ship without a crew. I poured myself a glass of whiskey I didn't want and stared at the aquarium. The fish moved in slow circles, their scales catching the blue light. They looked like thoughts, drifting, aimless, trapped in repetition. I thought about Martha again, about her hands in the garden, about how she used to hum hymns off-key while trimming the roses. She believed in cycles, bloom, decay, rebirth. I wondered what she'd say now, seeing how I'd turned her home into a bunker of secrets. The whiskey burned its way down, doing nothing to quiet the noise in my head. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint whir of the ceiling fan, became a voice. Each one said the same thing. You failed him. At some point, exhaustion won. I must have fallen asleep in the chair because I woke to darkness and the faint reflection of my face in the aquarium glass. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself. The lines deeper, the eyes smaller, the man older than I remembered. It struck me how time doesn't ask permission to make you disappear. Then I heard it, a noise outside, soft but deliberate. Tires on gravel, headlights cut across the window, slow, cautious. I moved to the door quietly, the way training had taught me decades ago. Through the curtain, I saw a black sedan idling near the curb. The driver's door opened halfway, then closed. A flash of a phone screen glowed inside, then vanished. The car rolled away. I stepped out onto the porch barefoot, the boards creaking under my weight. The air smelled of ozone and threat. There was a small envelope taped to the mailbox, my name typed neatly on the front. Inside, a single photograph. Ethan, walking through an airport terminal, Madison beside him. They weren't touching, but their shadows overlapped perfectly on the tile. On the back, someone had written 3 words. Phoenix by dawn. I stood there a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. Inside, the aquarium hummed, steady, patient, eternal. It was the only sound that didn't lie. The next morning I tried calling Ethan again. No answer. I checked the news, the flight boards, anything that could tell me where he was. Nothing. The helplessness sat heavy in my gut, the kind of helplessness that makes a man start bargaining with ghosts. Around noon, Laura called from Lubbock. Her voice was small through the static. "Did they come?" she asked. "Yes," I said. They looked. "Didn't find anything?" A pause. "Ethan texted me," she said. "Just one line. Going to finish what I started." "I don't know what that means." "It means I was too late," I said. "Don't say that," she whispered. "He's not beyond saving." I looked at the dead roses outside. "Everyone's beyond saving from something." Her breath hitched. "What are you going to do?" "Clean up," I said, and hung up before she could hear my voice break. I spent the rest of the day in silence, putting the house in order, folding laundry, washing dishes that weren't dirty, straightening photos on the wall. It was the ritual of a man preparing for inspection, not by police this time, but by memory itself. Each small act of order was an apology I didn't know how to say aloud. By dusk, I stood in front of the aquarium again. The bag under the pebbles glinted faintly in the blue light. My reflection floated beside it, an old man made of mistakes and good intentions. I thought of pulling it out, walking straight into the police station, handing it over with both hands. But the moment passed, and I realized something cruel. Confession doesn't always heal. Sometimes it just makes the wound official. When night finally took the house, I sat in the dark with my coffee gone cold and whispered to Martha's photograph on the wall. I tried, love. I swear I tried. But maybe I was saving him from the wrong storm, and for the first time in 12 years I let myself cry. Not the quiet kind men hide behind closed doors, the kind that shakes your ribs loose, that leaves you hollow and lighter all at once. The house didn't answer. Only the aquarium kept breathing, a steady blue pulse in a world that had forgotten how to. I didn't expect the help to come from the same man who'd flinched the night before. At 3:11 a.m., the landline rang, that stubborn old phone that only rings for bad news and church reminders. I let it go twice, then picked up on the third to keep the sound from feeling like a countdown. "Whitaker," Reed whispered. Paper rustled wherever he was. I was wrong. "About which part?" I said. "There's a list, a breath. About all of it. She's using me too. Madison. There's a closed-door memo for Phoenix. Transfer tonight, clean out tomorrow. But the board's not staying in Arizona. They fly back on the red-eye to stage a victory announcement at Abilene. 9 a.m., front lot cameras. She wants a headline to bury doubts." "What kind of headline?" "The kind with handcuffs," he said. "Anonymous tip that a Sunvale director's car contains controlled substances. She wants a public search to make you and Laura look unhinged when you accuse her. If they find nothing, you're discredited. If they find something." His voice trailed out like a man watching himself from across the room, a silence that felt like a bruise spread between us. "Which lot?" I asked. "Executive Row," he said. "And Madison's car gets parked early. Black SUV, plate ending in 27Q. She keeps a valet fob in her purse. She'll be on site by 8 to Shepherd Press. If she's going to move anything, it'll be then." "Why tell me?" "Because I looked at my kid while I shaved tonight and hated the man in the mirror," he said. "Because I got into compliance to stop fires, not light them. Because integrity apparently doesn't age." The old line came back like a tide. I swallowed. "You can call the police yourself." "I will," he said. "But they'll ignore me. I'm internal. Looks like theater if I cry wolf. You have history with them. And with the other thing." The other thing glowed in the next room, humming water blue. "All right," I said. "You stay on the inside. Keep them busy. Make sure Madison arrives on time." "Harold," he said, voice thin. "This ends careers." "It might save lives," I said, and hung up. I stood in the doorway to the living room and watched the aquarium breathe. The fish turned once, twice, the bag under the pebbles winking like a bad star. I sat, rolled my sleeves, and reached into the water. Coolness climbed my forearm, and the old ache in my wrist made a quiet case for surrender. I ignored it. My fingers found plastic. I eased it free. Drops pattered onto the tile, tiny sounds that felt too loud in a house asleep. I rinsed the outside of the bag under the tap, dried it with the hem of my shirt. It looked smaller in my hands than it had in my fear. A little gravity with a zipper. I wrapped it in a plain cloth and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. The weight settled against my ribs like an oath. On the table, I left a note for Laura in a handwriting that surprised me with how steady it was. "If I'm not back by noon, call Reed. Feed the fish. Burn what's left of the roses. Don't let whatever they poured into them touch the soil." I signed it the only way that mattered anymore. H. I drove to the edge of town, where the VFW hall leaned against the dark like an old sailor. The parking lot held 2 cars and a man in a deputy's uniform finishing a donut with the reverence of ritual. "Morning, Cruz," I said. He squinted. "Harold Whitaker. Thought you only came by for Veterans Day and bad coffee." "Figured I'd try the coffee on a normal day," I said, "and ask a favor." He listened as I gave him a plate number and a window of time. I didn't use the word tip, and neither did he. "We can run a canine sweep on the lot," Cruz said finally. "We've been doing random checks since that fentanyl mess over summer. If a complaint comes in, we're obliged." "A complaint will come in," I said, "from a compliance office that suddenly found its spine." He studied my face. "You sure you want to be near this, Whitaker?" "No," I said, "but the storm doesn't care." By the time the sun broke, the glass of Sunvale was catching fire. I parked 2 streets away, tucked my jacket close, and walked the long block with the gait of a man out for a pointless errand. Press vans already idled by the entrance, cables looped and patient. In the executive row, a black SUV settled into spot 17B, plate ending 27Q, as promised. A young valet handed keys to Madison with a laugh that sounded like it cost him something. She wore a blazer the color of fog and sunglasses that turned the morning into a private room. She checked her phone, checked the time, and disappeared inside with that efficient glide of a person who avoids remembering how they learned to move like that. I leaned into the shadow of a maintenance shed and waited until the lot turned breathless. The press funneled toward the front steps, interns stacked tabletops. Someone tested a microphone with 1,000 soft syllables. In the quiet between those sounds, my heart made its own. I took the copy of the valet tag I'd slipped from the stand while the kid flirted with a redhead, small, cardboard, innocuous, and clipped it on my belt like it belonged there. Then I walked across the asphalt with the purposeful aim of the invisible. The SUV beeped a polite hello when the fob in my pocket woke it. I opened the rear door, slid halfway inside, and let my hands do the work my mind tried to talk me out of. The spare tire well had a side pouch, black, elastic, made to tuck small, illegal ambitions. I placed the wrapped bag there, flat and patient, the way you set a letter on a grave. The world narrowed to the soft thud of cloth, the click of plastic, the heat at my neck. "Can I help you?" a voice asked. I turned slow. A security guard, baby-faced, sunburned, bored. He looked at my clipped tag, at my grey hair, at the expensive quiet of the SUV, and his brain did that math security brains do. "Media kit," I said, lifting a plain folder from the seat that hadn't been there until I picked it up. "They wanted extras in the executive cars." He nodded. "There are tones men trust if you've worked long enough to learn them." "Hurry it up," he said, already looking elsewhere. I closed the door, locked the car, and became air again. At 8:41, the deputies rolled into the far gate with a dog I'd met once at the 4th of July fair, a black lab named Tucker who looked perpetually apologetic. The K9 unit parked without sirens, without drama, the way grace sometimes arrives. Cruz stepped out, waved at a manager, said words like routine and cooperation, and the press barely glanced over. I stood near the pergola, a man in the way, another father waiting for nothing. Tucker sniffed 3 cars without interest, his tail wagging like a metronome set to patience. Then he pulled, not a lunge, not a movie moment, just conviction on a leash. He dragged his handler to 17B and sat, the way he'd been trained to sit when the invisible became real. For a heartbeat, the lot didn't understand. Then sound came back. The handler's voice lifted. Cruz called it in. Security tried to posture, then stepped back. People love order more than loyalty. It's why coups work. Madison emerged on cue, a smile already loaded. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "Ma'am," Cruz said, polite as sunrise, "we're conducting a sweep. The dog alerted on your vehicle." Her mouth twitched micro-small. "That's impossible. Only one way to be sure." Keys changed hands. Doors opened. The SUV's neat interior exhaled new car air and the faint ghost of expensive soap. The handler popped the rear, peeled back the carpet, and pressed a hand to the side pouch. Then another. He looked at Cruz and nodded. When he lifted the cloth-wrapped bundle, the morning changed shape. Phones came up, voices came down. The sound of a press pool, realizing they'd tripped into a story, rose like heat from asphalt. Madison found her tone fast. "This is absurd," she said. "I'm being framed." "Probably," I said softly from where I stood and watched her head tilt, a fox catching a distant scent. They tested the contents where everyone could see. The kit turned blue. The handler didn't look surprised. Cruz didn't either. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to step aside," he said. He was gentle. The cuffs were not. For a second, I saw everything that had brought us to this. The secret phone calls, the hungry ambition, the way a man starts measuring his worth in numbers printed on other people's paper. I should have felt triumph. I didn't. I felt relief, thin, trembling, the kind you don't trust yet. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered anyway. "Was that you?" Ethan asked. His voice shook like an engine misfiring. "I'm at the airport. They pulled Madison from the plane. Reed texted me. He said compliance found a mess in our house." "No," I said. "They found it in hers." Silence. Then, "Dad, what did you do?" "What I had to," I said. "What you would have if you weren't drowning." He breathed once, twice. I'm coming home." "You better," I said, and watched as the dog sat again, patient and good, while the cameras feasted. Across the lot, Madison lifted her face to the sun like it might pardon her. It didn't. The rose light of morning made everything look softer than it was. Somewhere far away, a plane changed its mind and turned around. The air in Abilene changed that morning. You could feel it even through the concrete, the kind of quiet that comes after thunder, when everyone's afraid to breathe wrong. The footage of Madison's arrest spread fast. By noon, it was on every local station, her face pixelated under the headline, "Corporate Scandal Rocks Sunveil Innovations." I watched it on the muted TV while sitting on the porch, coffee cooling beside me. Reporters used words like corruption, sabotage, and internal betrayal, but they didn't mention my name. Reed had kept his promise. He'd made sure the story focused on the company, not the man who'd baited the trap. Still, every time the screen flashed that parking lot, I felt the ache of something too close to guilt. The sound of tires on gravel broke my thoughts. Ethan's truck pulled into the driveway. He stepped out slowly, shoulders hunched, tie gone, eyes hollow from a night without sleep. For a moment he just stood there, looking at the house, the roses, the porch, the door he'd slammed 2 days earlier. Then he looked at me. "You knew," he said quietly. "I suspected," I answered. "You planted it?" I took a breath. "I moved it. From your suitcase to her car. I didn't know what else to do." He looked at me for a long time, the kind of silence that tests the structure of blood itself. Then he said, "You could have told me." You wouldn't have listened, I said, because lies would have made the distance permanent. Ethan rubbed his hands over his face and laughed, a tired, cracked sound. Jesus, Dad, do you realize what this means? I'm free, but I'm finished. Sunvale will cut me loose the second this settles. Everyone will think I was part of it. They'll think what they want, I said, but the truth's cleaner than rumor, even when it hurts. He sank onto the porch step beside me. I thought I was doing something big, he whispered. I thought Madison believed in me. She believed in what she could sell through you, I said, and you let her rent your good name. He winced, but didn't argue. For the first time in years, he didn't look like a man running somewhere else. He looked like my son. Inside, the landline rang again. I let it. The world could wait a few minutes. You called the cops on yourself, he said suddenly. I smiled faintly. Technically on her, but yes, something like that. Why? Because I spent half my life fighting storms, Ethan. Sometimes you have to make one break in the right direction before it swallows everything else. He looked down at his hands, at the calluses long faded from years behind a desk. I didn't think you still had it in you. Neither did I said. But fear's a hell of a compass. We sat there in silence until the phone stopped ringing. A few minutes later, Laura's car pulled up behind his truck. She got out wearing that same soft blue dress she used to wear for Sunday dinners, the one that made her look like something unbroken. When she saw Ethan, she stopped, half a second of disbelief, and then walked straight toward him. Neither of them spoke. She just wrapped her arms around his chest and stayed there. He lowered his head, and for the first time since Phoenix had been mentioned, I saw his shoulders shake. Laura looked at me over his shoulder. Her eyes were red, but there was steel under the sadness. Thank you, they seemed to say, even though she also knew what my thank you had cost. After a while, she whispered, "Let's go inside." The house welcomed them back, with the same blue glow it always had. The aquarium light washed over all three of us, making us look like ghosts reunited. Ethan stared at the fish for a long time. "That's where you hid it?" he asked. "Right there," I said. "Under the pebbles." He laughed softly. "You always were poetic about danger." "Better poetic than stupid," I said. "You were trying both." That earned a smile from Laura. "He gets that from you," she said. "The stubbornness." "I'll take the blame," I said, and poured them both coffee. For the first time in days, the sound of cups touching the table didn't feel like an argument waiting to start. Just life, simple and fragile. When the sun dipped, a soft knock came at the door. Reed stood there, hat in hand, tie undone. He looked like a man who'd seen his reflection too many times in one day. "It's done," he said. "Madison's in custody. Corporate's cleaning house. They want to talk to you, Ethan. Not as a suspect, as a witness." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'll go. I owe them the truth." Reed looked at me. "You too, Whitaker. They'll want your statement, and maybe to shake your hand." "Let them," I said. "But not too long. I'm tired." He smiled faintly. "You've earned tired." When he left, Ethan turned to me. "What happens now?" I thought about the roses, about Martha's voice telling me not all things that die stay dead. "Now we rebuild," I said, "but slower this time, brick by brick." Outside, the Texas evening spread wide and gold. The air finally felt lighter, not safe but honest. The kind of air you breathe when the fight's not over but the worst part is behind you. Ethan helped Laura clean up the table while I stood by the window, watching the last light fade over the yard. The roses were still gone, but the soil looked darker, richer, ready. For the first time in a long time, I believed something might grow again. Climax doesn't announce itself. It just arrives tired and demanding, the way a storm comes back after pretending to leave. By morning, Sunvale's lobby looked like a courthouse, and a funeral decided to share a room. Security lines, whispering interns, the dull glow of expensive lights, Ethan walked beside me like a man heading toward an operation he'd postponed too long. Laura pressed his hand once before the elevator doors closed and stayed in the atrium, because some battles don't need 3 bodies inside them. We rode up to the 18th floor. Compliance had set up in a glass conference room facing the city, a stage without curtains. Reed waited at the head of the table with 2 attorneys and a woman from internal audit, who looked at everyone like a story she'd already finished reading. "Mr. Whitaker, Ethan." Reed's voice had slept less than we had. "Thank you for coming." Ethan nodded. I stood, not sitting until someone asked me to. Old habits and respect I hadn't decided if they deserved. They recorded the meeting, names, titles, timestamp. Ordinary ritual for a day no one would forget. The audit lead began. "We need the walkthrough end to end. Mr. Whitaker Sr., start with the bag." I told it straight. The suitcase, the white powder, the envelope, the decision. I didn't cushion anything. I didn't ask for forgiveness. You can't cross a minefield with lace. "Where is the envelope now?" she asked. "In my kitchen," I said. "Still sealed." I took the bag because it would move fast and loud. The paper, that moves slow. It holds. Reed met my eyes like a man who'd been bracing for rot and found lumber instead. "We'll need it." "You'll have it," I said, and Ethan breathed, something like relief and despair sharing a chair inside his chest. They asked Ethan next. His voice stumbled at first, then found the path honest feet take. He told them about Madison, about the way admiration had felt like oxygen until it wasn't. He told them he hadn't handed over specs knowingly, that compromised documents had been glued shut and slipped back to him with trust as the seal. He admitted the hotel hallway. He admitted the thrill he'd mistaken for calling. Internal audit didn't nod. They didn't comfort. They collected. That's their job. Reed, though, kept a human face, and it mattered. Halfway through, the door opened. A man walked in wearing a suit that said Heritage and a jaw that said Lawsuits. Douglas Kerr. He didn't bother with introductions. "This is irregular," he announced. "My daughter has been falsely arrested. I expect counsel present on both sides." "Then sit," the audit lead said without looking up, "and listen." He sat because power hates being ignored more than it hates losing. He tried to cut in again when I described the parking lot. "Entrapment," he barked. "No," I said, "arithmetic. You admit to placing—" "I admit to redirecting danger away from my son," I said. "The dog found what danger recognizes." He smiled without warmth. "You're a sentimental criminal." "I'm an old sailor," I said, "and I know a current when it grabs your ankle." Ethan flinched, not at the insult, but at the memory that I had grabbed his ankle too, not to pull him down, but to keep him from going under. Reed slid a file across the table, his hand steady. "Mr. Kerr, while you're here, you can answer questions regarding these wire transfers from Solar Edge shell entities to a consultancy used by Ms. Kerr. Dates align with code access spikes on Sunvale servers." Kerr's face didn't move. His breathing did. The conference room fell into that sudden, brittle, quiet, high-stakes meetings get when everyone feels Truthland and is ashamed at how surprised they are. The audit lead clicked her pen. "We'll be inviting federal friends shortly," she said mildly. Kerr turned to me then, not to the attorneys, not to the board. "You think you won," he said. I looked at Ethan, at his tired eyes, at the way his hands clenched like he'd remembered they could hold things other than phones. "I think my son gets to have a future he can recognize," I answered. "Winning is too small a word." Kerr stood. "This is premature." "It's recorded," the audit lead said, and waved him toward the door as if he were a late delivery. He left, without slamming anything. That's how men like him save face, by pretending they never owned one. The meeting moved, questions, answers, a rhythm that felt like surgery, precise, bloody, necessary. When it ended, there were signatures and a promise that the company would issue a statement that didn't taste like a lie. We rode the elevator down. On the lobby screen, the news loop played Madison in cuffs again. The crawl at the bottom now mentioned external influence and ongoing investigation. Corporate had pivoted. Sharks had turned on sharks. The water would be noisy for a while. Then it would look clean and empty, because that's what time does to blood. Laura met us by the coffee kiosk. She searched Ethan's face and found something she could stand next to again. "You did it," she said, then looked at me. "You both did." "Not alone," I said, and thought of a black lab named Tucker and a dead set of roses that refused to be the last word. We walked out into the square of bright noon. Reed jogged to catch us at the curb. "One more thing," he said, lowering his voice. "The press will ask about the bag. They'll want a hero or a villain. Don't give them either. Give them ordinary. People respect what they might be." Ethan nodded. "What about my job?" Reed grimaced. "Suspension pending review. That could become reinstatement when this shakes out. It will help if you speak at the staff town hall." "When?" "An hour." We ate sandwiches on the steps like we were on some college quad where innocents never paid tuition. Then we went back in. The town hall was in the auditorium. Rows of faces. The kind of collective silence that says grief without the courtesy of flowers. A VP tried to say something stirring and mostly achieved throat-clearing. Then he introduced Ethan. My son walked to the podium without notes. He didn't look at the teleprompter. He looked at people. "I'm not going to defend my ambition," he began. "Ambition built this place. It put panels in fields and paid your mortgages. I'm going to apologize for my pride. Pride told me I didn't owe anybody my doubt. It told me secrecy was strategy. It told me I was too important to be ordinary. I'm not. I'm a man who forgot what the word we feels like in his mouth." A sound moved through the room. Not applause. Not approval, recognition, the loudest kind. He continued, "I'm cooperating with audit. I'm stepping back until they tell me to step forward, and if I don't step forward again, I'll step elsewhere with the lesson paid for." He glanced at me then, and the look said the thing we had been circling for days. "Thank you. I hate how you saved me. I'm glad you did." When it ended, some clapped, some didn't. But many met his eyes, and you can build a life on that. On the way out, a young engineer stopped me in the hall. "Your line," he said. "Integrity doesn't age." He tried a smile that didn't know what to do with itself. "I've been here 2 years. Today's the first day it sounded like it belongs to us." I nodded, because wisdom delivered like a business card makes me itchy. We drove home in a sun that finally felt like sun, not interrogation. Laura's hand found Ethan's on the console, simple as water. At the house, I went straight to the aquarium. I lifted the lid, dug slow, and found the sealed envelope, the other half of the first sin. I dried it, set it on the table. "This goes to audit," I said, "no matter what's inside." Ethan held it like fire wrapped in paper. "Dad," he said quietly, "what if it hurts us again?" "It might," I said, "but hurting and harming aren't the same. Hurt can heal. Harm hides." He nodded. We didn't open it. The right hands would. Late afternoon bled into that golden hour Martha used to claim was proof God liked us. I went out back with shears and cut dead stems down to the quick. The soil was clean now. The chemical stink had burned away into something like forgiveness. Laura brought a tray of new rose bushes from the trunk, small, stubborn, red. They had the same kind Martha loved, she said softly. "I thought we could try again." We planted in silence. Soil under fingernails, sun on our necks, the quiet work that says more than any speech. Inside, the landline rang. I picked up, prepared for noise. It was Cruz. "Just wanted you to know," he said. "The lab confirmed the lot find. The DA's moving fast. Also, one of my guys saw your bushes. Sorry about that." "They'll grow back," I said. "Most things do if you let them." After I hung up, Ethan stood at the doorway, hands in his pockets like a boy waiting to speak. "I've got a statement to write," he said. "For the press, for the board, for us." Say this, I told him, not stopping the shovel. Say you were wrong. Say you learned. Say you'll stand where the waves break next time and not in the shallow end pretending it's safer. He smiled, a tired, genuine thing. You always did like your metaphors. They keep me honest, I said. We watered the new bushes. The hose made a soft arc. The ground drank and didn't complain. Through the window, the aquarium glowed. Faithful, domestic, ordinary. The secret it had once hidden was gone, but its light remained, steady as breathing. At dusk, the three of us sat on the porch steps, not speaking, the way survivors don't when they finally understand they've survived. Down the street, kids rode bikes that needed oil. Somewhere, a radio played an old country song Martha loved. The wind turned warm and then cooler. It felt like a hand unclenching. "Dad," Ethan said after a long time. "Yeah, thank you," he said, "for choosing the kind of storm that leaves something standing." "I'll always choose that one," I said, "as long as I've got a choice to spend." We stayed there until the light went soft and the house behind us held steady. Walls, water, roses, and for the first time in too long, I believed the word home could survive our mistakes without pretending they never happened. The weeks that followed felt like breathing after a long dive, uneven at first, lungs unsure of their purpose, but slowly remembering. Abilene turned quiet again, though people whispered when they saw us at the diner. Small towns don't forget scandals. They just file them under stories we tell when the rain's slow. Laura returned to her work at the elementary school, smiling easier now. Children trust smiles more than adults do. They don't ask what it costs to earn them. Ethan spent most of his days driving to Dallas for meetings with Sunvale's new interim board, and most nights he came home dusty, tired, and lighter. There was humility in him now, the kind that sticks. Sometimes, while washing dishes, he'd hum the same songs his mother once sang. That's how I knew he was healing. One evening, he came out to the porch with a beer and 2 envelopes. "Dad," he said, "they cleared my name officially. Audit confirmed I never moved data myself. Madison and her father, they'll be in court for years." "Justice takes its time," I said. He nodded, then handed me the second envelope. "This one's for you. Reed said it's from the corporate board. Something about recognition." I opened it. Inside was a short letter and a Sunvale badge with my name printed under the title Consultant, Ethics and Security Advisor. I laughed, an honest, surprised sound. "They offering a 73-year-old man a job? They said they could use someone who remembers what right used to feel like," he said, half smiling. I looked at the badge for a long time. I didn't want titles, I wanted rest. But maybe, I thought, the two could coexist. "Maybe for a while," I said, "until I forget how to spell integrity." He chuckled, the kind of laugh that didn't hide pain anymore. "Madison once told me ethics was a luxury. I used to believe her. Now I think it's rent. You pay it every day or you lose your home." "That's a good line," I said. "You should write it down." "I just did," he said, tapping his temple. The night went still. The moon came up yellow and wide, sliding over the roses. They'd taken root, small shoots of green breaking through the soil where death had been. Laura joined us with coffee and sat between us, the way peace sometimes does when it's still fragile. "I had a dream last night," she said softly. "Martha was in the yard, trimming roses. She looked at me and said, 'Tell Harold it's time to rest.'" I smiled at that. "She's late," I said. "I've been trying." "Then maybe she finally noticed," Laura said, eyes glinting in the porch light. We sat there for a long time, watching the fish glow through the window. That aquarium had seen more secrets than any man should. I thought about draining it once, cleaning the stones, starting fresh. But I couldn't. It wasn't just glass and water anymore. It was a witness. Every bubble in that tank was a confession, learning how to forgive itself. The phone rang again one night. This time not for fear, but for news. Reed called to tell me that Madison had pled guilty to data tampering. Cooperation pending. Her father faced indictments. Funny thing, Reed said. She asked for your name in the plea statement. What for? I asked. Said she underestimated you, he said. Called you the kind of man who still knows where truth sleeps. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Tell her, I said finally, the truth doesn't sleep. It just gets tired. When I hung up, the house felt lighter. The aquarium light shimmered against the ceiling like the sea under a calm sky. I thought about all the mornings ahead, coffee, newspapers, quiet routines, about how redemption rarely feels like fireworks. It feels like silence that no longer accuses you. The next Sunday, Laura made dinner. Roast beef, cornbread, sweet tea. Ethan said grace, simple and direct. Afterward, he handed me a small wooden box. What's this? Open it, he said. Inside was a photo of Martha and me, cleaned and restored, her smile catching light the way it used to. Found it in an old frame at the attic, he said. Figured she should come back to the table. I set the photo by the window, facing the aquarium, where the blue light touched her face like memory in motion. Welcome home, I whispered. That night before bed, I stood by the glass and watched the fish drift in gentle circles. The reflection showed all three of us, me, Ethan, Laura, faint and whole. No secrets left beneath the stones, just water, light and quiet. I thought about the storm, the lies, the pride, the things I'd broken to keep others from breaking more. Maybe that's what life really is at the end. A series of storms we learn to survive by steering into them, not away. I turned off the light, left the aquarium glowing behind me, and let the house rest in peace it had earned the hard way. At dawn, Harold trimmed the new roses. The fish swam slow. Peace, at last, had roots. If truth sleeps in silence, wake it gently, before it drowns beneath your own reflection.